Tonight, the gloves are off. Keir Starmer directly attacks Nigel Farage. The Prime Minister says Reform's leader would crash the economy like Liz Truss.
Now in government, we're once again fighting the same fantasy, this time from Farage.
Also tonight, after raising eyebrows with a social media video of him tackling London's tube fare dodgers, Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick joins me to explain why he did it.
You do have to get out of Westminster, listen to people, and where you see things that are wrong, try to shame the authorities into taking action.
Plus, ahead of a government-commissioned audit on grooming gangs expected next week, I've been speaking to Labour MP Natalie on how she herself was groomed at the age of 15. And after the Heathrow boss says he's sorry for sleeping through a power outage at the airport because of his phone being on silent, we'll talk telephone etiquette. Definitely not on silent for us tonight, Zack Polanski and Gawain Towler will be with us for the next hour. It's Thursday, I'm Ali Fortescue live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Well, as you come to us tonight, we've got two breaking stories that I want to bring you up to date with. The first is that a man has been charged after a car was driven into crowds at Liverpool Football Club's trophy parade on Monday. Well, let's go straight to our North of England correspondent, Katerina Vitozzi, for the latest. A significant moment, Katerina.
Yeah, a short while ago, here in Merseyside Police headquarters behind me, we were updated by the investigating officers in this case that Paul Doyle, a 53-year-old man from the West Derby suburb of Liverpool, has been now charged with 7 counts relating to that incident in Liverpool at the tail end of the Liverpool Football Club victory parade on Monday night. And he's been charged, as I say, with 7 counts, the offences ranging from one of dangerous driving to causing grievous bodily harm with intent, wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, and attempting to cause grievous bodily harm with intent. Now, those charges relate to 6 separate people. We understand that 2 of those are children, and during that press conference, the police updated that Paul Doyle would appear in Liverpool Magistrates Court tomorrow morning. Let's have a little listen now from that press conference, first hearing from Sarah Hammond, who is the Crown Prosecution Service's Chief Prosecutor for the area.
The Crown Prosecution Service has today authorised Merseyside Police to charge Paul Doyle, aged 53, from West Derby, Liverpool, with offences of dangerous driving, causing grievous bodily harm with intent, wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, and attempting to cause grievous bodily harm with intent. This is following a complex and ongoing investigation into an incident in Water Street, Liverpool, on Monday the 26th of May 2025. The defendant will appear before Liverpool Magistrates Court on Friday the 30th of May 2025. The investigation is at an early stage. Prosecutors and police are continuing to work at pace to review a huge volume of evidence.
Now, in addition to that statement that you've just heard there, the Crown Prosecution Service said that the charges will be kept under review as the investigation progresses. There was also an update from the police on the condition of those who were injured in the incident on Monday night when that car got onto a street which should have been shut off to public traffic at the time and collided with members of the crowd who had gathered there. The police say that 7 people still remain in hospital, that they are all, though, recovering well. And there was also further information about the ages of those that had been injured in Monday's incident. We know that nearly 80 people have been in hospital to receive treatment at some point. The oldest was in their late 70s, and the youngest was a child aged just 9 years old.
Katerina, thanks so much for giving us the latest there from Liverpool. Well, the other developing story happening in the last hour tonight is from the White House. The White House has hit back at a court ruling against President Trump's tariffs policy, calling it an overreach. In the last hour, we have heard from the press secretary, Caroline Levitt, who's criticised judges who she says are preventing America from functioning properly.
Congress firmly rejected an effort led by Senator Rand Paul and Democrats to terminate the president's reciprocal tariffs. The courts should have no role here. There is a troubling and dangerous trend of unelected judges inserting themselves into the presidential decision-making process. America cannot function if President Trump, or any other president for that matter, has their sensitive diplomatic or trade negotiations railroaded by activist judges. President Trump is in the process of rebalancing America's trading agreements with the entire world, bringing tens of billions of dollars in tariff revenues to our country, and finally ending the United States of America from being ripped off. These judges are threatening to undermine the credibility of the United States on the world stage. The administration has already filed an emergency motion for a stay pending appeal and an immediate administrative stay to strike down this egregious decision.
Well, Sky's Shingi Marike is in Washington for us this evening. I mean, Caroline Levitt never really wants to hold back. She didn't hold back this evening, did she?
No, Caroline Levitt didn't hold back, Ali. And I think the word overreach there is interesting. Judicial overreach is a term she used because that was the phrase also used by that court when it put in a federal order in place to block the Trump tariffs, or at least delay them somewhat. They said that he didn't have the power to use emergency legislation to put in place those tariffs. And just to come back to more of what she said that this was put in place to stop the US being ripped off and that it would impact the US's credibility on the world stage. And just to come back to the broader look at this, that these tariffs referred to in the court ruling are the 10% blanket tariffs, which impact a number of countries across the world, as well as tariffs in place impacting Canada, Mexico, and China as well. And this ruling itself is one that Caroline Levitt in straight terms said that the Supreme Court would go up to the Supreme Court, that it's one that they would challenge. And you can see why, because it's one of the centerpieces of Trump legislation. You can see on the side of the screen there that day, Liberation Day, in which there was plenty of fanfare in which tariffs were put in place. And I think it started as a point of negotiating for this Trump government. They wanted to put tariffs in place and then work their way down. So what they are saying now is not just that this ruling is one that they disagree with, but they've broadened it out to call it an attack by the judiciary. This is another Trump theme. It's the idea that the establishment, that the lawmakers are activist judges that are in the way of making real progress for the US. And it'll be interesting to see how this saga rumbles on. But we do know that the government will appeal this, and they say they'll appeal it all the way to the Supreme Court if need be.
Shingi there for us in Washington this evening. Thanks so much. Well, to British politics now, and I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that we might look back on today as a really big moment, a turning point even for politics in this country. Today is a day that Keir Starmer decided to take Nigel Farage head on, the day that Labour effectively admitted Reform UK are a genuine threat. In a sense, it's no surprise. We've all seen the polling, we've seen real votes in the local elections. But it is worth taking stock, because this is the same Nigel Farage that for years politicians thought was a disruptor, but not necessarily a serious politician.
I know you want to ban our national flags, but we're going to wave you goodbye.
This was a Nigel Farage who knew how to grab attention, how to shout from the sidelines. But in many ways, he was also a failed politician.
Nigel Paul Farage, UKIP, 16,026.
A man who tried 7 times to get into Parliament, but the public said no. The thing is, his message back then to Labour in opposition was not a million miles from where it is now.
I don't think the Labour Party get it. I think it's been taken over by the North London intellectuals. They're miles away in every sense from traditional working families.
But the difference now, of course, is that Nigel Farage is in Parliament. And today, the Prime Minister set up an entire speech 4 years out from an election to take him on whether Reform UK really understands what working people are worried about. Nigel Farage has got under the Prime Minister's skin. That much was clear today. Amanda Acast was with the Prime Minister and sent us this report.
A Prime Minister on the attack with one clear target.
That's the question you have to ask about Nigel Farage. Can you trust him? Unlike Nigel Farage, I know what it's like. Nigel Farage stands for none of this.
On a visit to St Helens this morning, Sir Keir Starmer was hoping that linking Nigel Farage to Liz Truss would dampen the appeal of Reform UK, a party he's now treating like the official opposition.
We're once again fighting the same fantasy, this time from Farage. The same bet, in the same casino.
Reform UK say you're running scared of them. This is a speech that was very defensive, wasn't it?
Let me be really clear about the difference between this Labour government and Reform, because we know for a fact what happens when politicians say they're going to spend billions of pounds and it's unfunded. We tried that experiment with Liz Truss. Nice to see you. See you later. Bye-bye now.
Much of the North West is Labour heartland territory, but Reform UK are attempting to stage a land grab. They came a strong second in many local constituencies, like here in Warrington North. And Runcorn and Helsby, which they won in a by-election a few weeks ago, is just down the road.
Labour's poll lead has long gone for the chop, with Reform UK now some 8 points ahead.
I do think he's got a good chance. I mean, obviously, like the whole Keir Starmer thing, he's not delivered on a lot of his promises.
He's very close with Donald Trump, I've seen, and I kind of like Trump, even though he's got big opinions and stuff, he gets stuff done at the end of the day.
The economy's ruined anywhere. I mean, obviously we need someone to take charge and not ruin it, so...
But you don't think Nigel Farage is the one?
No, definitely not.
Thought Reform's promise to give everyone a £20,000 tax-free allowance could cost up to £80 billion. Parties say they'll make cuts to pay for it.
The issue with Liz Truss, there was some interesting stuff in the budget with regards to trying to spur growth on, which Reform will do, but she made no tax cuts. Nigel has laid out how we're going to save between 300 and 400 billion pounds from the exchequer spending as a result of decisions he will make.
Big promises are easier to make in opposition than to keep in government. But underneath the industrial relics of the past, voters in the North West are listening closely. Amanda Acast, Sky News, Warrington.
Well, a little bit earlier, I spoke to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones. I began by asking him about the Prime Minister's intervention on reform.
Well, they're a threat to the country and a threat to family finances, so it's important that we highlight that. As the Prime Minister said today, Nigel Farage made, I think, £80 billion worth of unfunded spending commitments this week, and that's important because we all lived through the consequences of that when Liz Truss and the Conservative government did it, 3 years ago, and interest rates went through the roof and our mortgages and loans and rents became much more expensive. Many of us are still paying the cost of that. And look, if Nigel Farage wants to be taken seriously, he has to act like a serious politician. He's not doing that. And as a consequence, he's a risk to family finances and a risk to the country.
You're obviously taking him seriously. You know, this is a party that have 5 MPs and the Prime Minister today summoning the media 4 years out from a general election. You're obviously taking them seriously. You say they're a threat to the country. They're a threat to you as well, aren't they?
Well, it's a threat to the country, and that's why you have to take it seriously, because, as I say, we've lived through this already under the Conservative Party. We know that it's really important that political parties set out how they're going to pay for their policies, and they don't play fast and loose with the economy because you play fast and loose with family finances. And we would make exactly the same intervention if it was from the Conservative Party or the Green Party. It just happens to be Reform this week. And as I say, if Nigel Farage is genuinely trying to be a statesman, he should do the job properly.
I don't think you've done this sort of speech about the Green Party, have you?
Well, they've not really announced anything, have they? So there's been no need to do so.
I think they have announced something.
Have they? What? I mean, I can't think of anything.
Well, you know, they are a party that have policies like Reform.
Well, they made policies at the election when they also announced lots of unfunded spending commitments and thought they could just borrow the money, which was clearly daft. And we called that out at the time. I'm not sure they've actually announced anything since.
So who right now do you think is your biggest challenge? Is it Kemi Badenoch or is it Nigel Farage?
Look, they're all at play, right? I mean, the election was 5 minutes ago. The Conservative Party is the official opposition. Reform are doing well in the polls. There's no denying that. And the Labour Party has a huge majority, which we're very grateful for, and we're in government. And we're going to be working really hard to show people the change that we promised them. But look, this is politics. If you've got parties going out making these types of unfunded spending commitments, it's right that we hold them to account whether we're in government or opposition. And it's for those parties, like Nigel Farage and Reform, to prove how they're going to pay for the promises they're making to people, because if they can't prove that, essentially they're just frauds because they're promising people things they have no idea how to deliver, and they know that.
It was interesting today. The Prime Minister said, unlike Nigel Farage, I know what it's like growing up in a cost of living crisis. And I guess, he has got a point. The Prime Minister and you both went to state schools. You've talked before about growing up in poverty. You've talked about hiding behind the curtain while your mum spoke to a loan company. I mean, does it get to you? Does it annoy you that Nigel Farage is cutting through, connecting with working class voters?
It doesn't annoy me so much, but you see the snake oil salesman at work who has made promises to the British people before turned out to not be true and is continuing to do that. And populism in our politics is a threat to our democracy, and it's a threat to family finances, and that's why we've got to call it out. And look, the ball is in Nigel Farage's court now.
Why do you think it is that he's connecting with those voters?
Well, because
this is a private school former stockbroker.
Well, I mean, he's clearly a bit of a con artist. I mean, there's no denying that. But look, he's going out promising people things. If I went out and said to everybody, I'm going to buy you a Ferrari, they would rightly say, well, hang on a second, how are you going to pay for it? Nigel Farage has got to do exactly the same. You can't just come out and promise these things to people, things that people really care about and want to see improve in our country, when he knows he has no idea how to deliver it. I mean, it's completely unacceptable, and he has to set out the detail.
He is connecting,
make these announcements.
Do you accept that? He is connecting?
Well, I get that if you look at the polling, some people are looking at Nigel Farage and reform, but I think now they're going to be looking a bit closer.
Quite a lot of people.
Well, look, they're now going to be looking a bit closer and saying, can I trust you? The answer is obviously no, you can't trust Nigel Farage and reform, irrespective of what they say, and we're just highlighting that today.
Do you think, they've been pretty clear where they stand now on winter fuel and on the two-child benefit cap. It looks like you guys are heading in that direction as well. Do you think you need to be clearer right now with people about those things?
Well, look, all of those things cost money, and it's right that we set out the detail and how we're going to pay for those in a proper and orderly way. We're sticking to the principle that millionaires shouldn't be getting subsidy for their energy bills from the government, so winter fuel payments will still be targeted to those that need it the most. Prime Minister has said we will review the threshold or the eligibility for that in the coming months.
Was that original policy? Was that a mistake?
Oh, well, look, it was a threshold that was set at the pension credit level because that was a mechanism we had to be able to deliver that policy agenda. But as the Prime Minister said, if we're able to afford to do so, he would like to review the threshold level. And so we're now looking at the detail of that, and we'll be able to make announcements in due course. And then likewise on child poverty, of course, we're a Labour government. We want child poverty to be falling in this country, not rising. Of course we want to help families lift themselves out of poverty. But again, if you're just going to make a £3.5 billion spending commitment, you've got to show you're going to pay for it. And by the way, child poverty is complex and multi-generational. So if you're really going to tackle it for the long term, you've got to do the proper work that looks at a whole range of issues that help people to really lift themselves out of that. And that's the work that we're doing with our child poverty task force that we'll report in the autumn.
So are we expecting something on the two-child benefit cap?
So you'll have the outcome of the child poverty task force, which will come out in the autumn.
Yeah.
Well, it's slightly delayed, a couple of months, but it's important you do the work properly in these areas. You don't want to do what Nigel Farage is doing, where you go and promise something to someone and you've not actually done the homework to explain how you're going to do it. That is not an acceptable thing to do. So we'll set out that task force in the autumn, which will look at a range of interventions to bring down that number in terms of child poverty, but also help families to be able to access work and better pay and better support in their local community.
And spending review coming up. Are you the most unpopular man in Whitehall right now?
Probably at this stage in the cycle, yeah.
Look, how difficult are those conversations?
Look, it's always difficult, right? Because you've only got the budget that you've got, and you've got to decide how to allocate it. And people obviously always want to do more than we're able to do immediately. It's a completely natural thing. We're gearing public sector budgets, this spending review, to deliver on the people's priorities at home. So it'll be no surprise that we're going to be thinking about how we get the NHS back on its feet and support public services, how we get control of our borders and the asylum issue, how we tackle the cost of living and those types of issues. And look, my job is to be in those meetings and to agree all the pounds and pence for every department each year. And that's a tough negotiation. It's a perfectly normal thing for government to do. And we'll publish all of those details on the 11th of June.
Can you give us a kind of peek behind the curtains? Long days, right?
Yeah, and look, challenging meetings, difficult process, but all of us in Cabinet, all of us in government were elected to deliver meaningful change for people across the country. We're all absolutely focused on doing that, and we will get to the 11th of June, we'll publish the budgets, and then we can get on with delivery over the years ahead and show the difference that voting Labour can make.
Right, let's bring in our duo for this evening. I'm excited, slightly nervous about this duo. Deputy Leader of the Green Party, Zack Polanski, and former Reform UK advisor, Gawain Towler. Zack, let's start with you, because Darren Jones not particularly positive about the Green Party there, saying there's no new policies.
Well, I'm not particularly positive about this Labour government. So, although I think he's right about the economic vandalism of Farage, let's talk about the Labour government. I think the most striking line today was when the Prime Minister said politics is about who you keep in your mind's eye. Well, we know who he doesn't keep in his mind's eye. He doesn't keep pensioners. He doesn't keep children who are in poverty. He doesn't keep millions of people around this country who are getting poorer. Their living standards are being squeezed while multimillionaires and billionaires are getting richer and richer. So I think the real question is, why won't he protect nature? Why won't he protect the NHS? Why is he only protecting the wealth of the super rich?
But why is reform cutting through to an extent that the Prime Minister is calling a conference about them, not you?
I think it's absolutely absurd that the Prime Minister has called a conference in response to Nigel Farage. I think what would be much better than calling a conference would be to actually change people's living conditions, to tax multimillionaires and billionaires and spend that money on our public services, to stop saying he's learning all the wrong lessons from the Liz Truss government. If you invest money to fund unfunded tax cuts, that's a terrible idea. But right now, what the Prime Minister should be doing is investing in our public services in the same way Ali did after the Second World War in a response to a crisis. That's how you get an economy moving again. We should look at the climate crisis, COVID, Brexit, all of the things that have happened to this country, and actually the Prime Minister should go, this is the moment to be spending big and investing in the economy, because that's going to create jobs, tackle the climate crisis, and stop the rise of the far right.
Gawain.
Sorry.
Labour have 403 MPs, Reform have 5.
Yep. And Keir mentioned Nigel, 16 times in his short speech? The guy is fixated, isn't he? Completely fixated. So, from our perspective, it's very funny. Nigel turns up and you could fart in a room and the Prime Minister would get excited. It's entertaining. Now, of course, I mean, we've only set out a number of policies, not the vast gamut of the whole public debate, but it has caused consternation. The fact is we've come in and said, look, we are broadly free trading, we are broadly laissez-faire. However, the reality of globalisation has meant that many communities have suffered. These are the communities who traditionally voted Labour, and they've looked at the Labour government, who, by the way, the idea of talking about unfunded stuff, the fact is this government arrived, claimed one thing, claimed there's 22 billion hole, they've got up to 35 billion, there's trillions in government debt, and they're worried about a little bit here and there. They have not prepared, they are not ready, amazingly, I agree with you, we know who the government don't like. You didn't include farmers in that, or businessmen, but you claim that they like billionaires.
Well, they like businessmen.
No, they don't.
Like
They're driving them out with their tax rates and their non-dom stuff. They're actually driving money out of this country, so you're wrong on that.
Well, I think they're pushing public money to private equity, like KKR.
No, I'm sorry. The non-dom rules are driving out many of the wealth generators and the taxpayers of this country. The top 1% pay 28% of tax. You don't like them, but they are very important.
I think it's always important when Reform are speaking to talk about the fact that since 2019 to 2025, they took £2.3 million in donations from fossil fuel companies. So no wonder they knock net zero. I care.
Wait.
The public care. You should have a banner underneath you saying who is paying for Reform to speak.
You claimed yesterday 95%. That's rubbish.
It's 93%.
93%. According to prospectus, there's 40%. You're
talking
talking balls again.
Well, does Smog have released it
regularly?
Please, can Sky News fact check?
Can we just...
happy.
One moment. Do you think Nigel Farage is being opportunistic?
No, in the sense that there's a little bit of that, of course, because you watch the Labour government in all sorts of trouble and it's quite fun to poke them with a stick. But at the same time, he's been talking about most of these things for a long time. The transferable tax allowance, that was in a UKIP policy document in the 2007. The child benefit, he was talking about a year ago.
The Prime Minister U-turning
But he put them all together in a speech.
And suddenly we have Nigel Farage talking about it.
Well, yes and no. As I say, the child cap he was talking about last year, the transferable tax allowance he was talking about 15, 20 years ago. These are putting things together in one go. What Farage is supreme at is during recess, he comes out, has a press conference, 2 days beforehand, he dominates the agenda. We're talking about it now, 2 days later. He completely dominates
He's
the
not
agenda.
supreme at voting, though. He didn't even turn up and vote against the two-child benefit cap. So he can say all he wants on TV when it came to actually voting.
Hold on.
He didn't vote against it. Does voting matter or does it not
I have to say,
Zack, why do you think it is that Nigel Farage is cutting through? Because he is cutting through with working-class voters, and it is interesting. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, he definitely is cutting through, so I'm not arguing on that. They're leading the polls at the moment. I think when you have populists, they don't need to talk about facts and information. They can just tell a powerful story. And a lot of the time, Farage is talking misinformation. On the left, we also need to learn from that. We need to tell powerful stories, but our stories need to be based in data, science and evidence. So when I talk about reforms donations and Gawain just goes, no, it's not true, we need people to fact-check that. Otherwise, reforms just come on. Who is holding them accountable? Who is making sure that they are not lying to the British public? And who is being transparent about where they're taking money from? And when they have policy positions...
There's a law. You have to actually state where your money comes from. There is a law.
Yes, which is why we know where it's coming from. So the media don't talk about it enough.
Right, OK. I have to say one thing. One of the reasons the Green Party haven't cut through is they haven't been able to do so. And in many ways, much as I disagree with Zack, he at least fights the fights, and one doesn't see that from your other people in the party. And congratulations on that.
I'll take that as an endorsement.
Well, yeah, but fair enough. However,
won't help me though.
There is a point that, as I say, we are not embarrassed. We do not believe that net zero is a good policy in this country.
I think you should be embarrassed to be climate deniers.
I'm proud of wanting this country to do well.
In Lincoln, they're going to lose 12,000 jobs because of your mess.
Sorry, Alex. We will come back to you for more friendly, and we need to keep it friendly, disagreement. Right, the Shadow Justice Secretary, Robert Jenrick, has shared footage of himself confronting people going on the London Underground who appear not to have paid their fare while claiming law-breaking, he says, has got out of control. Let's take a look at that video that he posted online.
Excuse me, do you think it's all right not to pay? Seriously, why do you go back through the barrier and pay? Do you want to go back and pay like everybody else? Do you think it's all right not to pay? Should we go over here to these guys here? Excuse me, gents. Hello. You're on camera, mate. You're bang to rights.
Just step to the side and...
All right, thanks very much, guys. It's the same with bike theft, phone theft, tool theft, shoplifting, drugs in town centres, weird Turkish barber shops. It's all chipping away at society. The state needs to reassert itself and go after lawbreakers.
Well, I spoke to Robert Jenrick about that video a little earlier.
Well, look, I think politicians make speeches, they ask questions, and that is absolutely part of the job. But sometimes you do have to get out of Westminster, listen to people, and where you see things that are wrong, try to shame the authorities into taking action. And I felt angry that law-abiding people were paying for their fares, not just on the London Underground, but on transport across the country. And they probably felt foolish, silly, that other people were flagrantly breaching the rules, not paying. That's costing everyone money because everyone is having to pay higher fares as a result. And it's time for the authorities to step up. And here in London, frankly, it's for Sadiq Khan to do something. He's a do-nothing mayor. He's been in office for years. This problem seems to be getting worse.
Well, look,
I want to see him take action.
It isn't part of the problem with lawlessness, the fact that the Tories been in power for such a long time, in charge of crime in the Home Office that you were in.
Well, Sadiq Khan is the mayor of London and has been. He's in his third term now. What is he doing? Why isn't he taking action? The number of people being prosecuted for fare dodging in London has fallen dramatically. And I think that the officers, there are good people who work for TfL, but the officers need to be given the confidence, the training, the ballast to get out and actually solve this problem. When I was at Stratford Station on Saturday morning, there were 8 officers seemingly doing nothing at all. There was one guy who was feet up on the counter, doom scrolling on his phone, watching as people were walking in and out of an open barrier, not, checking in and out. Presumably some of them weren't paying. And how does that make everybody else feel, the people who are playing by the rules? I think people feel that the system is broken, that Britain, actually, frankly, is broken right now. And this is part of a bigger picture. You've got graffiti, you've got people playing loud music on public transport without headphones, you've got shoplifting, you've got mobile phone theft, you've got tool theft from tradesmen's vans. It's time the state actually stepped up, reasserted authority and protected the interests of working people.
So you decided to step in. I mean, look, is it a bit of a gimmick? Is the fact that you're here now proof that it's worked, you managed to grab attention?
No, I felt that this was an issue that needed to be raised in profile, and that is what's happened, because it obviously tapped into something that many, many people across the country feel strongly about.
You're approached by a guy with a knife.
Yeah, there are some nasty people who are doing this as well as others, and yeah, I did meet some people who...
Well, you were approached. You approached him.
Yeah, there were people who threatened me when I went to speak to them, so I wouldn't recommend other people go and do this. No, I wasn't. I didn't feel in danger, but it's my job as a Member of Parliament, Shadow Justice Secretary, to be raising these issues. It's not the job of the general public to be doing this. It's for people like British Transport Police, the enforcement officers, and in other issues that I'm raising, the police and local councils to step up and take action. And I subscribe to the broken windows theory, where if small things are allowed to fester and to spiral, then it just gets worse and worse and worse, and it chips away at society, at the public realm in which everybody lives. And I want people to be able to walk safe and clean streets, not in fear of crime. And at the moment, we are seeing shoplifting at record highs. We're seeing increase in burglary. We're seeing mobile phone theft. This is creating a real problem, and somebody needs to step up and take action.
You also talk about what you call weird Turkish barber shops. What do you mean by that?
Well, I read the other day there was a small town in Wales which had 6,000 inhabitants, and it's now getting its 14th Turkish barber shop. Something strange is happening here. You are seeing the police taking action, and they have had raids on barbershops and seen there is a link to criminality, serious organised crime, money laundering, illegal migration. Of course, that is not all Turkish barbershops.
But do you think you're
there is
casting
something strange
suspicion over all Turkish barbershops by saying what you said?
No, I'm saying that there's something strange going on. How is the demand in a town of 6,000 people for 14 barbershops? It's commonsensical that there's something fishy going on here, and that's backed up by the actions of the police. And it's not just that. You're seeing it, for example, these American candy stores that are opening up, where, again, there is proven links, in some cases, to organised crime, money laundering. I don't want to live in a Britain where this kind of stuff is just happening and people turn a blind eye to it. I think whether it's myself as a Member of Parliament or particularly the authorities need to be gripping these things, or else it does chip away at society.
I guess the thing is, you are someone who was involved in a row about an unlawful planning development, who has had to pay back some of his expenses, who was accused of breaking COVID rules. I'm not saying all those things...
Well, none of those things are accurate.
Well, you were involved in a row about a planning decision.
Well, I was involved in a row, but there was no impropriety there.
Well, look, are you...
That's what you're suggesting, but that's not the case.
Are you the right person to be preaching about people following the rules on a £7 ticket fine?
Look, I do not think that people should be skipping the barriers at tube stations. I'm not going to allow that to happen. And if it takes me to get out there on social media, then I'll absolutely do that, because it's right for politicians to be holding people to account for this. And what I want to have is the law enforcement authorities stepping up. I want Sadiq Khan to be doing... What is he doing? Millions of people today have seen this video, have said, yes, this is something I experience in my daily life. Where is the Mayor of London? Radio silence. He's hiding away. He's, frankly, the one who's dodging the media today. He needs to step up, explain to the public what he's been doing, and bring this problem back into a sensible way that people can feel that the rules apply to everyone in society.
I know you don't have long, but I want to ask you a little bit about broader politics, if that's OK. There is talk, it's fair to say, about Boris Johnson returning. What have you heard?
Look, I speak to Boris occasionally, but I don't know if he wants to get back into politics. He seems to be enjoying life, doing speeches, writing books, travelling the world. The Conservative Party needs to focus...
Would you like to see him come back?
I think the Conservative Party has to focus on the future. Look, what I want to see is the Conservative Party turn a page...
And he's not the future.
Look, Boris, like many other people, play a part in our party. I want all the best talents to be involved in the party. But in order to regain the public's trust and confidence, it has to look to the future. That means acknowledging the mistakes that were made in the past, and it does mean a new generation of people stepping up and taking the party forwards.
It feels like quite an important day today, because we have Keir Starmer gathering journalists, taking the fight directly to Nigel Farage. What does that tell you? Is Nigel Farage now the official opposition?
No, the Conservative Party is the official opposition, but you're right to say we've just suffered our worst ever electoral defeat. The public, understandably, feel frustrated with the party because we didn't keep our promises on some of the biggest issues facing our country, like immigration, for example. So there's a lot of work for the party to do to regain people's trust and confidence. That's what we're doing under Kemi. if I can play my part in that, as I have today, by raising this issue, I should absolutely be doing that.
Dominic Cummings yesterday said that you were right on some things, including crime. He also said Kemi Badenoch's a goner. Do you care what he thinks?
Look, he can say what he wants, but Kemi is doing a good job as leader of the party. She's holding the government to account. Just today, for example, she's raised the issue of grooming gangs, where, in fact, she's put out herself a very powerful video where she's spoken with one of the victims of the grooming gang scandal, and she is pushing the government to take action and to have a full national inquiry. That is an example of her holding the government to account, setting important agendas in this country, and I'm fully behind her.
OK, Robert Jenrick, Shadow Justice Secretary, thanks so much for talking to us.
Thank you.
Well, over on our Digital Politics Hub live blog, today we've asked you for your reaction to that Robert Jenrick video, and I want to give you a little bit of a flavour of some of the comments that we received. This is one. Bravo, Robert Jenrick. Small-level crimes can lead to larger crimes and financial loss to TfL will be paid for by us, the public. That's from Ravi. Got another one. Here we go. Considering the security implications MPs face, it's irresponsible for any MP, more so a prominent Tory in London, to put themselves in the face of people who they're already calling out for any criminal behaviour. It's a cheap stunt and he endangered himself and the public. That is from Jake. And then the last one, anyone taking a look at Jenrick's career will see how hypocritical it is from him to lecture people about the rules. He ignored COVID rules back in 2020. He also tried to dodge planning permissions rules when he was housing secretary. That's from Stephen. We heard his response in the interview to those accusations. Right, let's bring our panel back in, Zack and Gawain. Zack, what do you think Robert Jenrick is up to?
Well, I think, first of all, exactly that. He wants to call out bad behaviour, but what about the bad behaviour of the government that he was high profile in? More widely, though, I think this is about, what do we want from our politicians? Do we want them to be vigilante policemen putting things out on Twitter? Or do we actually want them to deal with austerity and poverty in this country? I'd much rather see people not being pushed into a circumstance where they feel like they can't pay a fare or they can't get to work. And actually, the much better thing to do would be looking at the big systemic issue. I don't buy this broken glass theory if you're the government. Sure, that's true if you're a small local council. But if you're a big government who are in charge of your spending plans, then rather than focusing and obsessing on criminal behaviour of one individual, why don't you look at the systemic issues that are causing this for millions of people using food banks, millions of people who are homeless? Like, why are we not talking about those issues? Why is he out there making cheap stunts on Twitter?
He is trying to cut through, Gawain.
And he's succeeding.
Yeah.
And all credit to him for that. One has to say that. And the fact is, you've been there, I've been there, even you've been there, I suspect, given that we do pay our fares, and we see that happening. And there's this question of, hold on, these people, and I'm sorry, they're not all poverty-stricken, not by the expense of their trainers and their kit, who just feel that laws do not apply to them. And I completely disagree. The broken window theory, if you allow low-level crime to carry on as it does, the shoplifting under 200 quid, why bother, all this stuff. What about the small businesses who are being damaged? What about the people who employ people? Their hearts are being broken by a government and a society that doesn't care. You care a great... Big numbers, big numbers, big numbers. These are little people in their lives, living their lives, desperately trying to do the right thing, and they see other people just walking through the law and not caring a jot.
I don't think everyone's living in poverty, but some of them will be living in poverty.
Some of them will, but that's no justification.
So let's deal with the poverty
law.
rather than just going, OK, blanket.
Sorry.
And also let the police deal with it, not Robert Jenrick. It's so weird.
The police don't deal with it because the attention isn't there. The police have literally...
Well, because their funding has been cut and TfL's funding has been cut.
It's not just that. They have the agenda that they have is not about that sort of low-level crime. It's about policing tweets, as we know. It's not about policing streets, which people want them to do. It's to stop this sort of stuff. Because if you stop this, they don't graduate to far worse law.
What I'm hearing, Alex, is let's erode public service and let's instead...
No, it's not a question of eroding public services.
Well,
we need the public services to work.
Well, they'll only work if you spend on them properly.
Well, I agree, but also you've got a situation where society is now saying it's OK to break the law. It isn't OK to break the law. And anybody who says that's fine, and I'm sorry to say, Zack, you seem to suggest that it's OK. Let's not worry about it.
I never said that it was OK. I just said it's not OK to criminalise poverty. Let's actually make sure we support people.
Nobody is criminalising poverty.
Well, you are if you stand there
and say...
And put videos on Twitter rather than deal with the actual systemic issue.
You've just admitted that many of these people are not poverty-stricken. They are just...
And I said some of them are poverty-stricken.
They just don't give a hoot.
You're either standing with the marginalised or you're standing with the oppressor.
I'm standing against people who break the law.
Right.
And
we're both standing against people who break the law.
No, you're not. You're basically
I'm also
saying
standing with people who are in
marginalised.
poverty,
Hold on.
pushed to break the law.
You were saying
in the same way as women who have to steal baby food.
The law
it's the
doesn't
exact
apply to
same
you.
conversation.
People breaking into going through with often and normally you have these people, their security guards standing there and just let them walk past. Just let them walk past. And Jenrick, I agree, has highlighted this. It's interesting that Alex Wilson, the Reform London Assembly member, was highlighting this to the London Mayor only a couple of weeks ago. And Roberts is again aping Reform. Good on him. He's right to.
It's no surprise. I think there's policy differences between Reform and the Greens. And it's good to air those. But we also wanted to ask him about the future of the Tory party. And, there is talk, it's fair to say, Boris Johnson could come back. Would you be worried about that, Zack?
I don't know about worried about it. I think the Tory party are dead at this point because Liz Truss was not an aberration. She's the natural extension of what happens if you carry on free market ideology in the same way Reform at some point will crash and burn too. But what we need to worry about is the kind of insidious nature of what lies beneath that and also the kind of far-right rhetoric that's increasingly both from the Tory party, but frankly, the Labour Prime Minister too, when he's echoing Enoch Powell. I think we should all worry about that. So I'm not complacent about it, but I think the Tory party as it exists right now just don't have a space in British politics. They've been taken over by Reform.
Gawain, Boris Johnson.
Boris Johnson, I think, for a Conservative Party, to start thinking that a guy that they got rid of because he was a disaster is now the future of their party, that's quite worrying. To me, it's a little like the Jacobites who are saying, Bonnie Prince Charlie is over the water and he will come and save us. But Bonnie Prince Charlie only made it to Derby, and frankly, Reform have already got Derbyshire.
What about Robert Jenrick? Do you think he could...
I think he is positioning himself often to the right of Farage, which is quite interesting. But
would you be more nervous about him than Kemi Badenoch?
I'm not nervous about either. They're going to be leading a party of 16%.
If you had to choose.
Carry on, doesn't matter, crack on. And really, we're interested in what we're doing, not what the Tory party are doing. And frankly, looking at the polls, we're double them. We're at 32 and they're at 16, 17.
I do just wish we had leaders who centred care, compassion, looking after people in poverty. I don't think all of those are dream
Care,
things,
compassion means a decent economy, a place where you can actually afford to heat your house.
Yes.
Your policies means you can't.
You don't want to heat your house, you want to fund fossil
We
fuels.
are going to come back
I want people to have energy.
Shortly,
rather than
Gawain
insulate
and
homes.
Zack, thank you very much for now. Now, Dame Louise Casey is expected to deliver her review into grooming gangs next week, potentially. It's contentious, with the government pushing back against calls from the Conservatives and Reform for a national inquiry into the issue. Labour MP Natalie has spoken about how she was groomed as a teenager and how it's shaped her life. She told me the idea of another review makes her angry.
I was 15 when I fell pregnant and I was 16 when I had her. And it was really, really difficult. It felt like my life was crashing down around me. My teachers were really disappointed. They told me consistently that it meant that my life was now written off, and not just written off for me, but written off for her. It was really tough. And I don't want to make this political, but I needed some support. And so what I got is I got a state that meant that I could go to university and not pay tuition fees. I had a Sure Start appear in my estate, and it taught me, we had baby food classes, and they taught you to cook vegetables and not to blend chicken nuggets. There was a big sign on the wall that said, "Do not smack." And I'm like, why don't we smack? And that's why I'm here, even though sometimes it's really difficult.
And what do you think you'd say now to that 15-year-old you?
I would say the same thing that I say to every woman that has reached out to me. It wasn't your fault. I believe that it wasn't your fault. And you did your best. You didn't ask for it. You didn't cause it. You're not a slapper or any of the other things that you've been called. I believe you. I want to support you. And the reason I can speak out and other people can't, and so many people have said to me, please don't speak out, including my husband. He said, I don't want you to be the rapey MP. I don't want to be the rapey MP either. But if I don't speak out about it, who does? So when people have told me they're worried about me speaking out, I say, I've got my birth certificate, I've got her birth certificate, I've got a DNA test, and all of that proves that it happened. I know it's still scary and it's still difficult, but there is scientific evidence, biological evidence, that this happened. So I think that I have a responsibility to speak out. Right now, we've got...
statutory rape?
Yeah. Right now, we know that there are 10 births every day in this country from rape. Usually not just statutory, from all kinds of rape. There are 6 in my constituency every year. And we're not talking about it enough. And what I would like to be able to say to those women is, I believe you, I'm talking out about it so that you can feel more comfortable sharing your story. But this is the important part. The state will believe you as well. That is so important. So we've got a violence against women and girls strategy that is coming. We are taking violence against women and girls as a national emergency. That's really cool.
You know, you say you would tell 15-year-old you it's not your fault. Did you feel that it was your fault at the time?
As I was saying those words to you, in my head I thought, why are you lying? I believe that it was my fault. I said the wrong things, I did the wrong things, I was in the wrong places, I should have said no. I've had counselling for years to get to a point where I believe this isn't my fault, and deep down I still believe it is my fault. We have got a culture where women are taught from a very young age to believe that this is their issue. And in so many ways, we're going backwards. You know, you've only got to look online at any point and you will see. I knew that I would become an MP and have rape threats and death threats. I mean, the police phoned me the other day about a death threat for me and my 14-week-old granddaughter to see if I wanted to press charges. Things are getting more difficult for women, and I have to accept that wasn't my fault. And I have to support other women to accept it isn't their fault. And I have to accept that structurally there's a lot to overcome because we still believe that it is.
I mean, you obviously sound incredibly strong and put together sitting here now, but, you know, it must be difficult.
I find all of this difficult. Parliament was not set up for people like me. I was in a separate queue for free school meals. I represent an area where 7% of kids get A-levels compared to 52% nationally. Nobody's ever told me that I belong in Parliament. So I get there and every day I feel like I don't belong. And instead I keep going, I keep saying all the things I know are right to be said, because we have to be brave even when it's difficult. Because what I have got, everybody told me that this job would be a real privilege. And I thought, oh, I don't like working in a palace. There's a lot, I'm not sure where the privilege is. And then I realised really quickly the privilege is a platform. If I was a 15-year-old grooming victim and I reached out to you, your inbox would be too full to pick it up. Right now, you're coming to me and asking me to talk, and I can speak on behalf of women that don't have a voice. That is the best privilege.
Do you mind me asking how you feel about the man who groomed you now?
I think it's not okay what he did, but also it was so endemic. We've got to do something about it. But I am also grateful to him, which is why I'm trying to change the law. At the time, I believed everything he said. I believed that he loved me. I believed that I was the most beautiful woman in the world. And then I fell pregnant and he said, you don't tell anybody you have a termination, and if you do keep it, I will tell everybody it's not mine. And so at the time I was devastated because I believed he loved me. And I assumed if I was having a baby, we'd get married. I assumed everything. No, there was none of that. And I look back and I think, thank God, he did me a huge favour, because it meant that I could bring my daughter up to be the incredible woman that she is. And my husband could join me. We met when she was 6 weeks old. And that's just really incredible. What I want now, what I've looked back on is thought, there is nothing that can... Even if I'd have realised it was rape really quickly, which most women don't, it takes years to realise that it was rape. And even if I had said, no, you are a danger to me and her, you can't have anything to do with her, the law would have been on his side.
As you say, grooming gangs has been on the political agenda recently. Do you think that conversation is politicised?
Yes, and it really, 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 really annoys me. I think, please, respect what I have been through and so many other women, and do not take the trauma that happened to me and make it your weapon.
By the sounds of it, you don't think there does need to be another national review?
No, I absolutely don't. We've already had... My position on reviews is that they take years, they cost a lot of money, and then the last government ignored the recommendations. So the thought of a review just makes me angry. We need to know the scale of the crisis. We need to know where the hotspots are, and that's what is happening with Baroness Casey's review. We then need police forces. They've got the resource, skills and expertise to be able to deliver for grooming victims, and law changes that mean that perpetrators are more likely to be behind bars. We also then need prison spaces so that perpetrators can be behind bars. I am so angry. We need justice. And that's what I genuinely believe we're getting.
You sound very angry with the Conservatives. Are you angry with reform?
That is a really good question. No, I'm not angry. I'm not angry with reform. I think that people are angry, voters are angry because they've been let down for so long. Voting reform is about showing the government you're angry and you want things to get better fast. And, you know, who can blame people for wanting that?
The Labour MP, Natalie Fleet, talking to me there. Still to come on the Politics Hub. As the boss of Heathrow apologises for sleeping through the airport's outage earlier this year, we'll ask when it's OK for those in power to put their phones on silent.
Coming up on the UK tonight at 8 o'clock, the alleged driver in the Liverpool parade incident is now charged. We'll be live in the city. Also ahead, as the housing watchdog sounds the alarm on social housing, we'll bring you the story of a baby boy who died at just 15 weeks old, and his family fear the conditions in their home were a factor. Also, the Team GB canoe is banned from his sport because of his OnlyFans account that he's using to fund his Olympic dream. He'll be here too. All that and much more on the UK tonight at 8 o'clock.
Paris reverberated to the sights, sounds and smells of conflict. There's a focal point to all this anger, and that is Emmanuel Macron. I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels. There are dozens of people desperately clambering to get onto that boat. It is a chaotic scene, but it's being watched by dozens of French police officers on the beach. I've reported on migration across Europe, close up on the ground, understanding that sense of desperation and meeting the criminal gangs behind it. This old fishing boat set off from the Libyan port of Tobruk. There were 606 people who were on board. So we've been distributing life jackets to all the people on board this boat, and now the first person is coming on board. This is the ugly side of Italian football.
In Italy, everything is really organized.
Football's problems with hooliganism, racism were just dormant, and now they're back and they're getting worse. We cover so many countries, languages and cultures and work hard to gain trust to bring you the full story first. Help is slowly reaching these places. It's not just homes, but whole streets like this one that have been reduced to rubble and dust. This is a picture of destruction. Everywhere you look in this mountaintop community, there is absolute devastation. These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life, to annex Gaza for Israel.
The least we can do is just kick them out of our land.
Gaza, which is just 2 miles in that direction, is under attack again. Getting the chance to tell people's stories, it's a privilege.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Oh, no, I'll hang up actually because we're on air at the moment. I'm not going to take that. But sometimes you really do need to be disturbed, as the boss of Heathrow found out. Thomas Walby has apologised for sleeping through the power outage that upended the travel plans of 20,000 passengers earlier this year. I'm sure you might remember that outage. He missed a series of calls in the early hours of the morning when a fire at a nearby substation knocked out the power at the airport. An inquiry into what happened on the 21st of March has found his phone was on silent. The shutdown of Heathrow forced more than 1,300 flights to be cancelled. Walby has expressed his deep regret from being uncontactable at that time, but it got us thinking, when is it OK for people in power to switch their phones off and go to bed? Let's bring in our duo for this evening, Zack and Gawain. I don't know if you expected this. Zack, you're a politician. Do you ever turn your phone off?
I don't, and I should do more often. In fact, my boyfriend would really appreciate it if I wasn't glued to my phone the entire time. I think we can get lost in our own self-importance sometimes, and actually just having a rota of when people are on would give us all a much better work-life balance. So despite being a hypocrite on this, I'm really pro people turning their phone off and actually having a team who can all do the work together.
What was your advice to Nigel Farage when you were his Director of Communications? Did you tell him to be...
It went the other way round. It went the other way round. I'm not the person who's going to phone Nigel at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's entirely possible he's the bloke who could phone me at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I agree with you, Zack. I think turning off is fine. In the case of this chap at Heathrow, Thomas Walby, the fact he was woken up wouldn't have made a blind bit of difference at all.
Well, I don't know. He could have...
He couldn't have stopped the outage. He couldn't have stopped the fire.
We might have a point of agreement.
In fact, if he woke up in the morning, having been properly rested, he might be in a better position to deal with the ramifications than if he'd woken up in the middle of the night and couldn't do anything anyhow.
They probably need a more resilient system than hoping the guy keeps his phone on.
I quite like the idea that people who are in positions of power can actually switch off. Because otherwise they will never be able to think properly.
Phones are so complicated now, and there's so many different ways. I think I've got like 13,000 emails unread on one app, and then there's
16,000.
Yeah, there's so many ways that people can contact you. It's quite nice sometimes to just switch.
Semaphore, smoke signals.
Yeah, across Europe they're passing laws actually about the right to switch off, and I think that's also, not to turn it too political, but I think that's quite important for the future.
I don't think we should have a right to switch off, but I do think one should switch off.
Human rights, how dare we?
Human right to turn your telephone off. Just don't own a telephone.
You're contactable in the middle of the night?
Pretty much, but I don't need to be, so I want to be clear. The Green Party team don't make me contactable in the middle of the night, but I just have a sense
you want to be leader of the party.
Well, exactly, and we're a small team, and I just kind of want to make sure I have that responsibility, but taking a step back from it, there should always be systems in place to mean that there's a rota system.
Well, yes.
Is there a certain clout that comes with being hard to find contact?
I suppose so, but it's a rather silly one. Yes, but I quite like the idea that people can go away. They can turn off, actually. As somebody once said, not everything is that important, very few things matter at all. Really, we get terribly excited about these things. We get terribly excited about being on the button all the time. Boom, boom, boom. You must know everything always. No, you don't. You can turn off, you can go away from the news for 2 weeks, and guess what? Nothing's really changed.
Do you agree with that, Zack?
Well, I'd say news moves pretty fast these days, but you could argue that it's circular, so it feels like it's changing a lot, but actually there's a whole philosophical debate.
Everything is treading water to a certain extent.
I do think we could all use Teams more often. I don't mean Microsoft, I mean the like sense of community.
Sort of a bit of agreement at the end
yes.
From what has been a very fun and feisty panel. Thank you so much, both of you, Zack and Gawain. Matt Barbette is up next. Thanks so much for watching The Politics Hub.